G'day there, you're watching the Aussie BIM Guru, and today I'm going to be dealing with a Dynamo tutorial for Autodesk Revit that deals with how to batch print. So quite a useful function. So I'm going to acknowledge that there are a lot of tools out there that already do this, but none that I know of are free and have the level of customization that Dynamo can offer through this method. So the primary node that we're going to be using today, it's in two packages that I've found so far. So I think historically it began in the Archilab package, the one on the right there, but I have found a slightly more functional and up-to-date node in the Genius Loci package. So we're going to be using the Genius Loci package, but you can see that they are essentially almost the same node in principle. So the script creation process that I'm going to run through, so I will build the full script for the tutorial. We're first going to create view sets and print settings in Revit. We're then going to process our sheet names in Dynamo out of our view sets. We're then going to file path process them to enable them to be pathed to appropriate locations on a server. We're then going to look at our plotter settings. In this case, I'll be using one called BioPDF, but you could use Adobe PDF as well, for example. From there, we're going to actually batch print, and then we're going to run a secondary process which deals with tidying up our document names because they don't get quite named the way we'd like them to. So I'm just going to go over to Dynamo. So I'm currently in a Revit model. I'm just in the basic project for Autodesk. But what I have set up already is I've set up some print settings. So I've set up an A1 100% setting here. So that's pretty standard. And then I've also set up a sheet set. So under sheets, I've just said I want to print all 6 sheets in this sheet set. And this script does rely on those two things being set up. On top of that, I've also added revisions to most of the sheets as well. I have got one sheet with no revisions, so I will need to handle this in my document naming convention. And for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to keep it really simple, and I'm going to say the document naming convention is sheet underscore revision dash document name or sheet name. So if I go into Dynamo, we'll start off. So I've sort of set up a few building blocks to start with. So I've got the two packages here, Archilab and Genius Loci. So we're just going to work with the Genius Loci node here. We have a few other things we can use as well. So there's two print range settings that we can use. I found the one in Orchid a little bit more easy to use because it does have a bit more information in what you pick from. For the case of this, we're going to use selected views and sheets, which I believe is usually the right one to use for this. So we're going to use Genius Loci instead of Archilab in this case. We've also got the printer drop down available as well, where I can pick my printer, our print settings. So this is why you need that 100% A1 setting to be present. And then we can also get a view set, and we can also grab the views of that view set. So these nodes are all out of the box as they come. And this is where you need that view set to be set up. Sorry, I'll just get rid of my little guest. So you can get the views out of the view set by running this, and you'll see that it retains the sheets as elements. From there, I can basically interrogate a whole bunch of parameters about these sheets in order to get their properties into a sheet name, because I want to make a naming rule. So in this case, I'm going to take sheet name and sheet number, which are in fact actually already preset nodes. So I'm going to go back and take the sheet number and sheet name. And you'll see I can extract those properties very quickly and very easily from my sheets. In this case, they're not really that well named. I might just quickly rename them. They've got some what I'd call bad characters in their names. So I'll just take out some of the bad characters for file naming. They might work, but I just want to be better safe than sorry. Okay, now they're much more standardized. So if we go back there and rerun this, you'll see that that should update those sheet names to suit. Actually, it hasn't. I probably need to run it again and then refresh my script. There we go. Now it's been refreshed. We actually want to get the current revision of the sheets as well. So there isn't a node that does this. So instead we're going to have to actually use the get parameter value by name node. So I've got that up here, and this is again a default node, and we're looking for current revision. So this node here is called element parameters. It's a really handy node when you want to see what information you have available to get out of an element. So I usually keep one of these off to the side, and if I'm not using it, I'll just freeze it to save my script a bit of time. So from there, we actually want to get this as well. So if I run this, you'll see that I get all the parameter values by name, but unfortunately one of these sheets has no revision. So in this case, I'm going to set my syntax so that it's a 0 if there's no revision. That way the sheet name won't fail and give me empty lists. So I'm going to have to manage that empty cell. So I'm going to do a check for a Boolean, and I'm going to check if any of these cells equal nothing. So that implies a string with nothing in it. If I run that, you'll see that I'll get one true on that. So I'm going to use the if node at this point. The if node doesn't always work anymore, so what I tend to use is one from the Zebra package called logic if, which retains that functionality. So I'm going to say if that Boolean is true, then I want to have 0 as a string. That will replace all my trues. And then if false, I want to get the corresponding number out of here. And I'll need to lace it to longest so that it matches the length of this list when it gets the results. And if I run that, you'll see that all those values have been replaced with 0. So that's how you can sort of process out your, I guess, your potential null revisions in this syntax, which you'll probably come across in your own. So I guess the syntax I'm using is a pretty common one. I've used it in most places that I've worked. So we'll just try and clean that up a little bit. So essentially we've got sheet name, sheet number, and revision. From there, we actually want to put these together. So I'm going to create basically a big list, transpose it, and then concatenate. So I want to basically prepare some lists here. So we're going to say list of repeated item. And we're going to go back and count how many of these we're dealing with. There are probably shorter ways to do what I'm doing here, but this is the way that I tend to use. So this will tell me how many sheets I have. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I want to make a list of the repeated item. And we're going to say that many, and the item that we want is our separator, which is a dash in this case. And then what we're going to do is take these items and we're going to build a syntax out of them. So we want to do sheet number, and then dash. I might actually make another separator as well for my sheet name. So you see as I add these in, I'm basically setting up the infrastructure for my naming convention. There we go. And we add the last one as sheet name. And there we go. So what we can do now is transpose this list to essentially get all that data as individual pieces in individual lists. So that is essentially our naming convention. And the string that the way we need to deal with this now is run a concatenate function, which will join all the pieces in that list. So if I run that, you'll see that I end up with 6 things that are essentially my sheet numbering convention. We could say that we actually want to do, so let's say we'll do underscore instead. There we go. So that's a pretty good convention right there. So these essentially are our sheet names. We then need a directory that these are going to actually go and become paths for. So we'll set up a directory node, and I'll just browse to a demonstration folder and print here. And we need to use a node now that is directory file path. So file name to file paths, and I believe this one comes from Genius Loci as well. Yes, Genius Loci. And this saves a lot of time. So basically all we have to do is say directory path, file names, and this works as PDFs. And you'll see what it will give us is basically a full path with the PDF on the end as well. And this is essentially our file path that we need to feed into this node here. So what we're going to do from here is take these nodes and move them a bit further down the line. So we're going to take our file paths, we're going to take our views, which are essentially our sheets from back here. Just double check this didn't make a list, because I know this can't be a list. All right, this is a list, so I need to flatten this. All right, I've got a cat jumping over my computer. From here we need to feed things in like our print setting, our printer name, our print range. You can see here these are all quite intuitive. They pick up what's in the project. And then whether we want to run the scripts. So we'll take that as a boolean. And we'll say true. We do want to run the script. So that's pretty much the infrastructure for this node setup. But what we need to do first is actually visit some of our settings instead. So a lot of plotters will typically have settings that you need to customize. So in this case, I've taken an area and said this is where I want my documents to go to. So I'm just going to say that my documents are going here. And there'll be a little bit of hoop jumping that you'll see in the way the documents are named, which we'll process after. And I've turned off everything that basically confirms things or gives me dialogues. So I just say I never want to see save as, I never want to see my settings, I want all errors to be suppressed. That way it just goes straight through to print. You don't get any dialogues trying to get you to put in certain settings as you go. So we'll just refresh our script and reopen it. Just make sure our settings are okay. So I've had to use default here because A1 didn't previously work. But ideally now this should work. I did get a warning in Revit about the 100% A1 settings saying they were incompatible with my printer. So if I try again and run this script, ideally it should plot these documents now to my printing folder. And you'll see them coming through here. So you can see that the plotter I'm using doesn't understand how to name these documents. It's putting the right things on the end, but it's putting the wrong thing in front of it. So it's basically putting the directory path and it's replacing all the illegal characters with underscores. This isn't ideal. So what we want to do now is sort of process this name in a secondary script. You can also see we're getting this .pdf on the end as well, which isn't what we want. So essentially we're going to say that we want to find that document. So we need to take this file path, but we need to replace what we call the illegal characters of the name. So if I go and look for illegal characters, you'll find these illegal file name character nodes in Springs. So basically if I take this and I say to replace my illegal file names with an underscore, which is what my plotter's doing, we should be able to get our actual document names as they come. If I connect this up. And you'll see, there we go. So that's how we're getting our full name up to the .pdf. From there, we actually want to look for a rename file node. So here we go, there's rename file. So our directory is our original directory that we path to. And we are looking for the extension of PDF without the dot. And our source names are essentially going to be these elements here, because you can see that it's taken the full directory right back to the front. And that is the name that we do not want. And the name which we in fact want is our target name, which we originally got back here as our concatenations. I think I may need to flatten the list. Yes, I need to flatten the list. So I'm just going to go back and flatten this list here and connect this forward to the target name. So what I've got here is basically two parts of a script that I can run independently of each other as a secondary script. So if I disable my batch print and leave my renaming activated and I run the script, it should rename these files to the correct name. So if I run this, okay, one thing, could not find, okay, so I haven't quite got the names right, so I just need to double check. Okay, pdf.pdf. Okay, it found one of them, but it didn't find the rest. So I've done something wrong at this point. So I'm feeding in a bunch of file names as a list. That's fine. Extensions PDF. The source name is coming from here. So that is the source name. The target name is coming from the flattened list. So I think probably what's wrong here is I need to actually lace my lists to their longest length. I think it's falling short. But what I'll do here is I'll freeze this node and disable this part of the script. And I'll re-enable my batch print. I'll clear out this folder so it's ready to be printed into. And usually you need to refresh the script. Usually I find the easiest way to refresh is just to close and reopen it. I'll run the script again. Off it goes. batch prints. Okay, so all our drawings have batch printed. So from here, we want to reactivate our rename node and disable our batch print and run the script. And essentially these are all renamed into their correct name now. So basically this is a one-two punch script. There's ways that you can shape this into a more intelligent script that does this all in one sequence. However, things like waits or pass-throughs won't work in this case because you can't predict how long it's going to take this to work. So you could potentially use two scripts in Dynamo Player, for example, to execute these in a row where they expect the naming syntax of the plotter to be incorrect. I still need to experiment with more plotters and find the ones that maybe don't misinterpret how these should be named, because obviously BioPDF doesn't quite get it right. However, once you've got that set up, this is a repeatable thing that you can use in view sets over and over again. So it's very powerful. It can also be automated using such packages as Orchid outside hours. I just thought I'd add one more section to the end of this video where I actually show you a cleaner version of the script and how you can run it in Dynamo Player as well. So I've done a bit of cleanup here in my downtime, and I've actually set up the script so that you can pick the view set as an input. I've frozen the parameters. I've locked off some of the things that don't matter as much. I've put the separators separately so you can control them if you need. I've defined the directory as an input in Dynamo Player. So you'll see here, I've also defined all the print settings as inputs. And I've actually went and tied in the true false to the run print setting. So if it's in true, it will print. If it's in false, it won't. And I've set up a logic gateway that only lets the renaming occur if printing is set to false. So the script can be used for both renaming and for printing as well, depending on whether you set this to true or false as an input. So if I just leave Dynamo and run Dynamo Player instead, and I'll just minimize Revit. So if I go to the properties of this script, you'll see the Dynamo Player in action once this opens up. And this would enable a user to use this outside their model, potentially. So you can pick your printer. So I'll pick BioPDF, I'll pick my print setting as default. My view set is sheets, my print range is selected views and sheets, and my directory is here. At the moment it's set to rename. So if I set it to true, now I'm printing. So if I run this, you'll see that it will basically execute the same script, but in a lightweight version. So as this begins, it will begin to print these documents, and you'll see these come out. And the script will keep running until it's basically finished the print job. Some of them might go past the end of the script depending on how fast your plotter is. You'll see some are slower than others, but essentially it operates at around about the same speed that a standard plugin would for this purpose. And you'll see that the script is finished, but the plotter is still sending some drawings. So I should have one more drawing coming through. Okay, so that's done. So now if we want to rename them, we just set it to false, and this will run the other half of the script, which is to rename those documents. And there you go. So that's how simple the script can be to run via Dynamo Player. So that was pretty much the demonstration for today, which we've just been through. So if you've got any questions or comments about the workflow and potential, let me know. I've only really just found this technique, so there's still a lot of things that I can do with these packages beyond what I've shown you, and likewise that you can as well. So if you like what you see, feel free to follow and subscribe me. And thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.